With a second round opponent still to be determined, the Florida Panthers are going to go into the second round with a rest advantage, but will they have a health advantage going into it?
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, May 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at MondoMan12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now free on the Google Play or the App Store. Game on. So we are bringing to you this episode on a Wednesday night, which for tonight's episode, this is a little bit of a strange recording time for Jacob Winans and I, as we are usually do Tuesday nights, but with Doug Plakins joining the show and his availability being Tuesday only, we decided to push this back, but still a Wednesday night release to bring Jacob Winans back here on the show. And Jacob, great to have you back on, even though it's later than we usually record, but welcome back to the show, and great to see that the Panthers are getting a rest advantage over their second round opponent. And not only that, but we're not worried about watching a game 6 on Wednesday night. And for me personally, I get to record back in my home base for the first time in over a week and a half. So welcome back to the show, my friend.
Yeah, man. Good to be here. Even though it's a weird time, Doug is fantastic. He definitely gets the driver's seat when he wants it. So happy to adjust. His calls were absolutely electric in Game 5, by the way. If Panthers fans, if you haven't had a chance to listen to his calls on some of those goals, especially the Evan Rodriguez one, man, that was I could listen to that all day. That was awesome. But yeah, it's nice. You're home recording and a little less highway time, and we're not stressing watching these games right now. You can just kind of enjoy hockey for the next couple of days. You don't have to worry about what the Panthers are doing. And yeah, we're for the first time in a while we're recording an episode stress free. Not a whole lot of anxiety to talk about here. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah, as am I. And hey, an early series for the Panthers to get themselves the rest necessary, and also for Doug Plakins' call. You spoke about the videos, the Evan Rodriguez call that he had. If you look at all the videos from games 3 and 4 in Tampa, you'll see me in the background of a little bit of a cameo. Me and the other writers, Kobe Guy, Alex Baumgartner, David Dwork, George Richards, Jordan McPherson, all of them there. So you'll see us in the background in the upper level there. So pretty cool to be part of Doug Plakins' shots there during the playoffs. But we do have some great news. Let's stay on the topic of rest for the Florida Panthers. So they haven't had a formal practice since clinching their Game 5 victory. They didn't have anything, even media availability at all on Tuesday, the day after Game 5. But they did go back to the facility today where they had all their media availability. Sam Reinhart, Anton Lundell, Paul Maurice all spoke to the media. And also, when it comes to this time of year and all the hits that the Florida Panthers were taking, even Paul Maurice spoke about how the opposition that they're awaiting is going to get more of the bangs and bruises. And if you're a hockey player and you're looking forward to a next round, even though they talk about rest versus rust, you're the hockey player's mindset is take the rest while you can. But speaking of that, Sam Bennett, Paul Maurice did provide a little bit of an update saying that he will practice tomorrow. He will skate. He won't practice tomorrow. He will skate tomorrow, but it won't be with the group. And then he will decide from there based on his status. And thankfully for the Panthers, they were able to adjust with moving Stenlund and Anton Lundell up a line. Thankfully for Lundell, he's had over 20 plus playoff games now. But now that Game 1, which I'm still thinking likely it's going to be either Monday or Wednesday, one of the two, based on arena availability based on TD Garden and MSG. But Sam Bennett, he said very high possibility of game one that he's going to be able to play. And Paul Maurice spoke about how Bennett, an identity player for the Panthers, when you think about being physical and just getting the key draws in their own end too. And it's great to see that it was, I don't want to call it injury minor, right? We don't know the pain that he's going through, but it's great to see that there's still that possibility of him, which Paul Maurice said it was a high possibility that he is going to be playing in round 2 of the postseason.
Yeah, and that's huge for the Panthers because Sam Bennett's a different player in the postseason. The numbers back it up. The eye test backs it up. He takes his game to a different level in the playoffs, and so much of that second line success feeds off of Sam Bennett, his play driving and his physicality. Matthew Tkachuk plays so much better with Sam Bennett at center, and getting him back will be huge. And the one thing that the Panthers have a real clear advantage against Boston, if it is Boston, we still don't know yet, but presumably if you play the advantages here, it is more likely to be Boston. The biggest advantage the Panthers have is up the middle in their center depth. The Bruins don't have a ton of centers that they can use in some of those matchups, and then if it is Toronto has great center depth, and you're going to need the Panther centers to match that, and that was the advantage last year was when Barkov and Matthews would cancel out, when Bennett and John Tavares would cancel out, you'd have that Anton Lundell line. And Anton Lundell was just too much to handle for Ryan O'Reilly and on that third line, and there was the advantage to the Panthers center. So either way the second round goes, whether it's Boston or Toronto, the center depth is going to be huge, and Sam Bennett being able to play is something we're really, really hoping for, because he makes such a big difference. The game against Tampa, when he gets hurt, he had already scored a goal and gotten a primary assist on the second goal. They don't win that game without Sam Bennett, even though he only played half of that game. You really can't afford to be without him too long. But I will say, Anton Lundell had a monster series against Tampa, filling in for Bennett on that second line, and Kevin Stenlund jumps up to the third line and was fantastic himself. So that looks good. That looks good for the Panthers going forward, and even down to the fourth line. Stephen Lawrence gets in playing fourth line center, and he was fantastic. Ends up scoring a game-winning goal in the first game he slotted in. So it's a big advantage the Panthers have there when all the centers are healthy. But you really need Sam Bennett as you get deeper into this playoff run, because those center matchups don't get any easier.
No doubt. And you think about where with the Panthers, what they have as an advantage over Boston's center depth. But maybe you could say that the Boston Bruins have an advantage at the blue line for them with how their depth is going, even though Brandon Carlo didn't play in the overtime period last night against the Maple Leafs too. But then you see the goaltenders, you only can play one. Jeremy Swayman's taking the majority of the minutes in net. I mean, you could argue that that's maybe a push for between the two teams too. And then when you look at Toronto, blue line, I believe, for Florida is better. Their goaltending is better, but then the center depth is the push for that when it comes to the matchups there. So, but we'll break more of that down if it ends up being detail by detail. Whoever it might end up as we prepare for the second round series. But that's a little bit of my first impressions of either one of those teams, as we still have yet to know who it's going to be. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more of something that is happening again with the Florida Panthers now advancing to the second round for the third straight season. What is that thing that is happening again? We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And all right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends and time tournaments where you can work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's so much to get. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their unique mini games like digging for treasure or a Robo Penchico machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it free on the Google Play or App Store. Game on. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Back on this Wednesday, May 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday night edition of the show, a Winans Wednesday night. But by the way, want to wish our best to former Panthers prospect Logan Hutsko, who has decided to retire from pro hockey after dealing with a multitude of injuries throughout his young career. Hate to see that someone so young is unfortunately dealt with so much that he just flat out, unfortunately, told himself that he couldn't play anymore. So best wishes to former Panthers third round pick Logan Hutsko. But Jacob, I want to discuss more about the fact that Bobrovsky is not only a Vezina candidate now, with him being the finalist with Thatcher Demko and Connor Hellebuyck, which is crazy to think the best goalie in the league this year happened to be probably the worst goalie in the postseason through the 5 games with Connor Hellebuyck. But that also goes to show the penalties that Winnipeg was taking and also the amount of high danger chances too. But did you see the Hockman and Crowder clip that he pronounced Vezina incorrectly?
That was absolutely hilarious. And Red Deer's reaction to that pronunciation was one of the funniest things I've seen in a very long time. That was awesome.
So if you're wondering how Mark Hockman on 560 pronounced it, he pronounced it Vezina, and then Red Deer's like, well, he's won a Vezina, but I'm sure he's won 2 Vezinas in his life before. But
I think what was even better than the original video was David Dwork. He reposted the video and put Vezina in profile, making fun of the bots on. Yeah, I thought that was flawless comedy there.
No amount
hilarious.
No amount of blocks can get those to go away. One time they tweeted saying link in bio, and I quote tweeted say cool link. Here's mine, and mine was obviously my link tree to Locked On Panthers, but that's neither here nor there as far as that. But hold on, let me take a quick sip of water. But the Panthers are doing it again. And what do I mean by the Panthers are doing it again? And what I'm talking about is the fact that they have now made the second round for 3 straight years. The buzz wasn't really too much as far as the national for the Panthers really in 2021. But going to the final, we saw last year how Matthew Tkachuk was on the NBA on TNT when the Heat were in the Eastern Conference Final against the Boston Celtics. But which, by the way, shout out to David Ramil and Wes Goldberg on the season that was for the Miami Heat. Unfortunately, they did lose in 5, which was a result that I was at least expecting with all the injuries. But Matthew Tkachuk had an appearance on a very big program, the Pat McAfee Show, now, which is aired on also ESPN, the main channel, which is a big deal when it comes to coverage. We know about the games, but honestly, I get so annoyed when ESPN has the coverage of hockey and then SportsCenter comes and it's like 55 minutes of basketball, only 5 minutes of hockey, but that's neither here nor there. But he was on the Pat McAfee Show talking about just his experience in hockey, being from Arizona, and also Matt spoke about matching the desperation there too, and also talking about the most important thing about a series, and talking about being healthy, knowing that you need to match the other team's physicality, and also spoke mostly about the Vegas series too, about how the Panthers took that series and learned from it, and also the guys who were returning guys, who about 13 of them, and the fact that situations for the Panthers as far as late game that they've been battle tested, it doesn't feel like a battle for them anymore. But outside of those topics that I just mentioned, and the talking points too that Matthew Tkachuk had on Pat McAfee, it's again, like I said, it's happening again, where the Panthers are getting the necessary attention from outside of just you and I talking about it, on you and I coming out here once a week and me doing this show 5 days a week. It's more than just this now. So I'm it's great to see.
Yeah, it's awesome. They've definitely earned it. It kind of started during the COVID realignment year, where Florida and Tampa really kicked up that rivalry and then ended up meeting in the playoffs. No one had really paid much attention to the Panthers, and then that series, the Panthers gave that loaded Tampa team the best fight they had that entire playoffs.
Yeah.
That series opened everybody's eyes. Everyone was drawn in by that series. Everyone loved it, and they kind of realized the Panthers played a special brand of hockey at that point. And then post Matthew Tkachuk trade, that shook up the hockey world. The Huberdeau Uyghur for Tkachuk deal, no one saw that coming. It showed a willingness to make bold moves from Bill Zito, and the Panthers became really, really serious as contenders immediately after that. And then, of course, the miracle playoff run to the Stanley Cup final as an 8 seed who barely gets in. That's always going to bring attention. And then I think there's also the fact that last year was just such a big year for South Florida sports, given that the Heat were doing the exact same thing as the Panthers during that period of time. You saw University of Miami and FAU both playing in the Final Four. You saw University of Miami women's team make a run. It just seemed like everything in South Florida sports was clicking right at the same time. And I think it brought a lot of attention to the region. And then with all that regional attention, the teams that were the last ones standing were the Heat and the Panthers. And naturally that brought a lot of attention. And it's well-deserved, because the Panthers have been legitimate contenders for a few seasons now. And with Matthew Tkachuk kind of as the face of that, even though Barkov is the captain, Tkachuk is sort of the face of the franchise. He's a superstar. He takes all the media attention and he kind of runs with it. So I think it's really, really cool, not just for the Panthers, but for the sport. A guy like Matthew Tkachuk is super marketable, plays in a big sports market, a market that people like to be in and that people like to follow. And he does great with the media attention. But yeah, it's cool seeing him get to headline on ESPN with Pat McAfee. Last year was hilarious when he was on the NBA on TNT show. I thought that was super funny. And of course, we get the legendary Charles Barkley with the Sergei Bobobka that we've come to embrace. So I think it's awesome. Can't complain about it at all.
Sergei Bobobka with Charles Barkley, and then Shaq saying, "I don't have a question because I don't watch hockey. I just like seeing you guys hit." Too. And they still made a conversation out of it too. Like, that's the thing. You're with the boys BSing, and then you still have a pretty decent conversation on TNT too, with that. So it's just great. It's just overall just hilarious too. And also he spoke about they also got into the hockey questions, discussing more how they were prepared this time around, and how the different modes of the postseason, with January 2023 coming, they were playing playoff hockey, and then it was just about fine tuning the game, and talk about how the guys are chomping at the bit to get back into the mix again too. And because most of the people on Pat McAfee are football players, Matthew Tkachuk even did a little bit of a twist there on his appearance there. He asked some fantasy football questions too to guys like, obviously, Pat McAfee, Adam Pac-Man Jones there too is one. AJ Hawk is there, former Packer. So he also created a little bit of a conversation. Also spoke about how the locker rooms and everybody having a fantasy football team too, and also the fact of what they do together, like watching football. and even watching the hockey games, they are keeping a big eye on the series, on all of them, especially Boston and Toronto, to see not just the oohs and the ahs, but the X's and O's, as Jameson Olive wrote in his article today on FloridaPanthers.com too. But this gives us also an opportunity to transition over to segment number 3. We're going to discuss more about how the Panthers, how far they have come, and where do they rank as far as playoff attendance. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday, May 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday, a Winans Wednesday night edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Jacob Winans is here with me on the show. And Jacob, I want to do a little bit of a screen share for you and the audience. I know that you have seen this tweet, but I want to share this with the people watching on the YouTube. But if you are listening to this on audio, this is a tweet from October 13th of 2014, Florida Panthers opening night there, and the announced attendance for this one was 7,311 on opening night for the Florida Panthers, around the beginning stages of the Viola ownership group. And now the Florida Panthers, through 3 home games in the first round, lead the NHL in playoff attendance at over, and their capacity for these games are 101.5%. So they're standing room only sections for the Panthers that they are even filling too. So just looking at this, Jacob, and now seeing where they are in attendance, how do you feel about this?
Man, it is it's pretty special, because at this we're now at a time where the Panthers preseason games, and we've seen them have those weird midday preseason games where it's like a doubleheader against Nashville usually. Even those games, which are mainly junior prospects and AHL guys, draw more than 7,000. It's pretty incredible to see where they've come from. That, just looking at that picture, it's like I can't even. That it just seems so far gone compared to what that was. And you can't help but credit the organization for sticking with it, because at that point in time, I think it wasn't just me. There were a lot of us who were really, really scared that we were going to have our team relocated. And those rumors were loud and they were real. And it felt like it was almost inevitable, where if they didn't turn things around and start winning games, we weren't going to have a team here anymore. Now they're a contender. Now they're leading the NHL in the playoffs and in playoff attendance. And you can really, really feel that home ice advantage. I was there for 2 of the 3 games at home in the first round. It's not like it used to be where they'd pack the building, but it would be mostly visiting fans. It's really floor to ceiling, diehard Panther fans in that building. And I don't really subscribe to the whole, well, it's a bandwagon fan base because they only showed up when they started winning, or these are fans who are new to hockey and don't know anything about it. First of all, every franchise gains more fans when they're winning. That's just how sports work. And also, it's South Florida. I truly don't care if the people in the building are new to hockey. Most of them probably are new to hockey. And I think that's a great thing. There have been the past few years, there have been countless games that I've been at where I'll hear conversations, people in my row or behind me or whatever, who are at their first game or their second game or are new to it, have been watching on TV because the team's interesting. They're asking questions, about offsides or asking questions about line changes, simple things about
Which is
hockey
great.
that not a lot of that people who watch hockey obviously know. And I love that. I think that's one of the coolest things about our market is it is a young market, and it's a lot of new fans, and I think that is super super cool. And I think it's unique to the Panthers because a lot of our fans, they hear those questions, they explain those answers, and they make new fans out of people who are new to games, and you can see it paying off now because we've got a packed building. The place is going crazy during the playoffs. It's a real home ice advantage, and you can tell it's legit because you hear Barkov talk about how he got goosebumps hearing the crowd, and he's been here since those empty seats, and he's talking about how he thought that we had already hit the max of how much fan support the team could have, and then shows up for Game 5 and it blows them away again. The impact is definitely real, and the players are seeing it, fans are seeing it, and those of us who've been here for a long time, you can definitely feel the difference now.
Yeah, and the waving towels with the three different options of the lights, with the strobe, the standstill lights too, and just the regular blink, just waving in the crowd, and even a Bobby chant after a goal against too. That just really goes to show how much this region has grown with the sport. And listen, if you are going to a game and someone's asking you a question about rules, embrace it. Answer those questions for them. Don't shame them if they're still trying to learn the game. I mean, it's almost 2 decades that I've been watching this sport now, and making the playoffs for the Panthers in early 2010s, in 2012 specifically. That's really what caught me on the bandwagon too. And listen, remember the Marlins game was being sold for $1 on Monday. Like, if I've only gone to like 2 games in the last 5 years. If I show up once the team is good, does that make me a bandwagon fan? No, it just means I'm not putting money in an owner's pocket that doesn't love the fans back too. The Viola family loves their fans back. That's what they do. They put their money where their mouth is when it comes to that. So,
yep. And I'll say this, especially in playoff time, I've and you can attest to this too. I've been in that building when the team wasn't very good, and when they were trying to compete, but they didn't have the roster to do it. I've been in that building where the fans didn't show up, and I've watched countless games with empty seats next to me. I've watched games in entire empty rows. I would 1000% rather watch a game in a row full of brand new fans who don't know much about hockey yet than watch it in an empty row. And that's, if people call that bandwagon fans, then that's just what it is. But it's South Florida. It's a growing market, and new fans are always welcome. I have no problem at all with that.
Or would you rather that than sit with a whole bunch of corporate suit and tie people who pay a lot of money for a ticket but actually don't care about the sport and don't cheer loud for a team? Toronto. So
I'll pass on that one too.
So yeah, just think about it. I mean, yeah, Toronto has that reputation of that when it comes to fans. I mean, you see more of the diehards outside of the arena, and even not only nationwide but internationally. I mean, yeah, you've admitted this as a Dallas Cowboys fan, Jacob. The Toronto Maple Leafs are definitely the Dallas Cowboys when it comes to attention and just underachieving. But
absolutely.
Hey, they still have that opportunity to make something happen. But one last thing before we get out of here, just we're gonna go over this really quickly, and I wanted to discuss. Maybe this isn't really maybe this is a conspiracy theory, maybe not. But let's look at the first 5 games and for the Boston Bruins and compare it to last year. Game 1, the Boston Bruins only allow 1 goal at home. They win. Game 2, they lose at home. Game 2, they lose at home. Game 3. The exact score, 4-2 Boston in Game 3 at home. Game 4, they win on the road. in Scotiabank Arena this year. They won in Florida last year. Game 5, an overtime game that they lose at home for them. So Matthew and I scored the game winner last night for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and last year it was Matthew Tkachuk after Linus Ullmark turned it over as he was trying to clear it right before Matthew Tkachuk guaranteed that this was coming back here for 7. So this isn't necessarily JFK and Abraham Lincoln kind of conspiracy for this. It's not on that level, but we could maybe, just maybe, we could see that same exact ending this year. So did you know any of this before I read that to you, Jacob?
I did see some comments online after Game 5, comparing it to the Panthers and Bruins last year. What I think is so funny about this is that either way this goes, I mean, as Panther fans, we don't really like either team. There's respect there for both teams, but neither team is liked by the Panthers fan base. So either way this goes, it's going to be pretty funny for Panthers fans as it relates to one of these two teams, because right now Boston is sweating bullets thinking back to what happened last year to them. They've got to be the red flags are raised right there. And then Toronto is thinking, this can't possibly be another heartbreak to Boston. And it's starting to look like it very well could be. And they gave their fans hope, and they could just let them down again at home in another loss to Boston, which we've seen 1 trillion times. So either way this goes, it's going to be really, really funny to watch what happens to one of these two teams. So I'm going to enjoy the outcome of this series either way it goes.
Yeah, and the Panthers, they're looking to be the healthier team regardless, because like we said, Brandon Carlo didn't come out in that overtime for Leafs Bruins. Matthews, don't know if he's going to play Game 6. Willie Nylander missed the first 3, and they're turning on each other. They're turning against each other. With Nylander and Marner, and Marner's getting a lot of heat too, and something that has been
big goalie questions in Toronto. Also, they've already, same as last year. The trust with Samsonov has run thin, and they switched him already. So,
so we're just gonna keep waiting until we have an opponent. But by the way, before we get out of here, congratulations to the Florida Everblades coming back from down 3-1. To win Game 7 shutout fashion 4-0 against Jacksonville, and now sets up a Battle of Florida ECHL edition between the Florida Everblades and the Orlando Solar Bears. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, a Wednesday night edition for you and I here on the show. So tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8. I'll be pretty active there the rest of the playoffs for sure.
Awesome, man. See you next week, and can't wait to have you back on, my friend.
Looking forward to it. On to round 2.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.